There has been a point in time where mutual aid societies have helped the masses of African Americans with physical needs such as housing, jobs, financial literacy, and education. And out of all associations, the Black Church, being one of them, had the most impact to cater to the community and embody a structure of organization. With the accomplishments made in the past, have we turned away one of the strategies to gain freedom? Is the Black church still a part of this blueprint for Black power? Chapter 23, Black Church, the key to economic empowerment. Question number one: should the Black church still be considered as one of the driving forces to nationhood? I don't think so, because I don't think it'll be as effective as it was in the past. Reasons being, well, the culture of church and religion has changed. Um, it's become more modern. The individuals now are they're they're in a different class. So in the past, it was more easier to come together during the civil rights era, during slavery, because everyone seemed to agree and also, join forces for that common to solve the common denominator. How can we gain independence, and what can we do to support each other? But now in this age with church, each church has a total different ideal of not only preaching the gospel, but also supporting their own people. Some are not even on that type of time anymore, where they're wanting to, build around their community. Um, Another reason why I don't think it'll be a driving force is the leadership. In page 559, he talks about how the Black church is has been a major source of Black leaders. And in one of the points, he says, finally, the Black church must become more prudent with their investments of economic resources. The Black church manages financial resources, which must in turn be invested back into the Black community. And so, with the positions of a treasurer and the pastor, the deacons, the deaconesses, we can see, we know stories of how money's been mismanaged or misused in the church to either support, the the higher ups, or the higher ups in the hierarchy, or for the head of the church itself, and not necessarily the members at all. Um so for me, so going back to the question, I don't think it can be a driving force to nationhood because of those reasons. And it's just a different time period to where everyone has a different way of going about things with their church. And I don't think they're necessarily as serious in the political aspect, or even wanting to, support an agenda such as nationhood.
I'll say I also don't think that in this current time that the Black Church should still be considered as one of the driving forces to nationhood. In the '90s, when Dr. Wilson was writing this book, I think maybe that was the end of that.
Hmm.
As far as on a mass scale,
Mm.
there are churches, individual churches, I say, but as a whole movement, the mindset seems to have shifted to here. Um,
Hmm.
and so the leadership in many of the larger churches, it just seems to me, without any research. It just seems to me to be focused on here and maybe having projects abroad. But
Mm-hmm.
as far as us establishing uh, a nation, I don't see that as the thrust from many of them. It just doesn't seem to be the case. Excuse me. And I was also thinking about church attendance because always hear these statistics every blue moon.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody would come up with, oh, how many people are going to church now, and then specifically targeting the question to the African American community.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're still, if not first, second, as far as church attendance. I think first maybe the Latino community is also up there in the uh, same level, but
Mm-hmm.
I know that young people in general, the attendance is just not believing like they used to. So, um, not getting into whether they should or shouldn't. The whole point is that that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to be trailing off every year.
Mm-hmm.
So, looking to churches, you need the youth, you need the next generation to obviously sustain a nation. So that's why I'd say no to that question.
I agree with what both of you have said. The way I see the church now, in terms of like, it's not geared toward nationalism. It's more like the churches now have integrated into what is popular for the current society. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's keeping up with culture.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm also seeing that with a lot of the churches now. A lot of people that are attending, they attend it as a social activity. So there's no thoughts of integrating in terms of like for any political reasons or
Right.
any other political agenda. So I kind of see it like that. That most people are not going to churches to develop some social awareness.
For the second question, should the black church still be considered as a space to discuss social and political issues within the black community? So I was thinking, okay, let's say that when Liberia's established, it's been cemented. The BAIO, we have the nation state on lock. Like there's an agenda, everything is already put in the stone. I still think that going to the black church could help in some way. It's like, okay, how can I describe this? It's like a burning candle, right? Before it goes out, let's just see if we could get more members to, have a nationhood mindset while the time being, because everyone is, you can just see it. You could pretty much tell in the Sunday services, not everyone is invested like that anymore. It's like there has to be something new. There has to be a new purpose. So I think that space could still be used for that. Like, let's give someone the alternative because they're noticing there's not much change going on here in America.
Yeah.
hmm
And when you have like those spaces to, talk about politics, to talk about nationhood, socioeconomic and changing the narrative, I think that's a perfect time to, get it while it's still lit before it burns out. Like I was very inspired from watching Godfather of Harlem these past few episodes where you had, Reverend Adam Clayton Powell, he's a minister of his church. And sometimes Malcolm would, go to his congregation to speak.
hmm
And try to, get people to pretty much stand up for themselves and to support a bigger cause and to think about, fighting back politically, you know, and not just violence itself. So it's like there's still benefits to that because, you know, churches, they do have those activities or those groups that outside of religion, they do talk about, whether it's relationships or they do have like a men's group or they talk about life. So I think
Mhm.
I think during that period, like that could still be, useful for that and somehow, some way, get more members. But then again, it all depends on, the organization of the church too, if that's something that they will even allow or if they even want to invite that.
But I think it might be risky for some churches because even though there's supposed to be like some
Mm-hmm.
separation of church and state, a lot of these churches do receive funding. So what I see is a lot of behavior that is more toward being assimilist or integrationist, where
Mm,
you're integrated into the society. So they do vague talking about social and political activity. They encourage all people to vote.
mm,
They encourage people to be involved. But in terms of as the black church talking about, uh, being liberated,
right.
that is not what I've seen. Even at predominantly black church,
Mm,
they're still integrationists.
yeah.
They're
Yeah.
still obviously being assimilated into American society. I have never been to a church where they talk about, doing something in Africa, much less Liberia.
Yeah.
And most of it is geared toward, staying peaceful, accepting all people, being kind to all people. So
Hmm.
it's they don't walk that line.
Last section of chapter 23, the Black Church, key to Black economic empowerment. And these last two sections we are going to talk about are the economics of the Nation of Islam, as well as trade relations of other ethnic nations to the African American nation. It's a lot of nations, but
That's dope. That's
any
dope.
anywho, first question. Should the Nation of Islam still be considered as one of the driving forces to nationhood? Now, in the few pages that I've read from this last section, I was very amazed by just the contributions of Nation of Islam has made, in the past years that I didn't really know about because it wasn't taught to me at school. And the
Hmm.
fact that they've had, lots of temples and just a population over hundreds of thousands, and just really taking the ownership of doing for self and building their own infrastructure is very inspiring. But I've also wanted to know, which is why I created this question, at this present time, will it still be considered as one of the driving forces to nationhood? Why or why not? We talked about the black church and last week as to why it wouldn't be, but what about with the Nation of Islam? And Minister Dawood, please feel free to express your thoughts on it. And you say you had a similar uh you,
Sure. Yeah.
you had a
Well,
similar
I
take on this,
if
right?
anybody else if anybody else wanted to go before me, I didn't want to hog it, but I do
Mm-hmm.
have a unique view on this whole thing. So,
Mm-hmm.
so, uh, starting from the bottom, working to the top.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, um, black organization focused more on work and physical outcomes than they did mental and spiritual outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
They understood that we needed spirituality, but they understood that we needed something material much more than we needed the spirituality, because we were getting our asses kicked. And
Mhm.
so when you came in the nation, you were expected to work. You were
Mm-hmm.
expected to sell no less than 100 Muhammad speak when you went out there. I don't know if y'all know this, but when you see a dude and he's carrying papers nowadays, you'll see like 10, 20, 30. And I had a minister that was under the honor of Elijah Muhammad, and you could carry no less than 100, sometimes 200. And that was considered weight. And so what would happen is in these older organizations, they put the men to work, they put the women to work, they put the children to work, and everybody was responsible for bringing nickels, pennies, and dimes into the organization. What ended up happening is when the second generation leaders took over, Minister Farrakhan, Dr. York, all the rest of these dudes, they shifted the focus from money to mental health and spirituality. And in my judgment, my teacher taught me, who passed away on my birthday, that most of these leaders use the model from AA and NA. You can hear AA and NA in a lot of the stuff that they're saying. So, I mean, that's something that most people don't know. And so they shifted it to spirituality and mental health and things like that. Mental health and spirituality is important,
Right.
but when you're trying to establish yourself as a Black organization, you need money. And so therefore, what ended up happening is they followed the same models that their predecessors followed, but they followed them very loosely, and they didn't understand that time was of the essence. So me and Hollop always talk about how you went to the Million Man March, hundreds of dollars was collected. You had the groundswell of all the people, and what did you do with it? You just used it as in Farrakhan and that nation. You used it as a popularity tool and bragging rights. So whenever you argue with one of these fools, they always come up and they say, "Oh well, can you call 1,000,000 men to Washington?" I mean, there's been, you know what I'm saying, many marches since then.
Right.
And so that's the foundation. But here's what ended up happening over the course of time. And this is where I get to the crux of what I always say. Inflation made these organizations irrelevant. Because if you think about basic business for a Black organization, it's what I refer to on that show as the three-hand system.
Okay.
You have you have the organization, you have the local temple or local body, and then you have the believer. That money has to go through three different hands.
Right.
So if you're collecting $1, just think about it. Every dollar you collect got to go to three different parties. And the portion that was supposed to go to headquarters was much larger. The portion that goes to the local body was much larger. And what did you get? Oftentimes, off of $1 paper, I don't know if y'all know this, but a soldier would only get 25 cents off the paper. So if you're selling 100 papers and you're only getting 25 cents off that paper, how can you feed your family off of that?
Right.
Now, back in the
and this is the
day,
believer that was receiving that, right? And that
yeah,
is
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So back in the day when 25 cent was a lot of money, under the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, 25 cent was not a lot of money when I was a child. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, you would see in the paper, you would see cap. They would be like, "Oh, I bought my house off the Nation of Islam." Like, that was bullshit. No, you didn't. There's no way you did. And think about how this then turned around and affected family dynamics. If you're trying to raise a family, and remember, in Black organizations, when it comes to sex, we're not supposed to use condoms, right? Or contraceptives. So you come into the organization, your lady is pregnant every 5 minutes. And you're supposed to support all these children that y'all having with 25 cents off the dollar? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so this was viable back in the day. But once we got into the 90s, inflation continued to make things irrelevant.
Question number 2. One of the pages I've highlighted talks about the consumer movement, and in definition, it is the conscious refusal to buy from others more than from themselves or what they can sell to themselves. So, with the second question, I was wondering what your guys' take on it. Is it more difficult now than before to have a consumer movement? I think so, because there's really no direction of why are we not, buying within ourselves or supporting our own businesses. What's the end game? Because everybody's just putting out the word buy Black, buy us for us. But at the end of it, what is the whole purpose? What are we trying to accomplish here with this? If there's no agenda at the end of it, then at some point that money is going to go back to, non-Black businesses, and we're back to square one. So what consumer movement is there, or how do we even get to that point?
I can tell you this much.
Mhm.
From my observation, it is Black women who are intentionally trying to buy from other black people
Hmm.
that I've seen on social media,
Mm-hmm.
in my own and up here. Like there's sisters that are saying, I fuck with black people. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's very prevalent amongst black men, but I have seen, and I'm not saying this just because I ain't got a cap for nobody.
Right.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying? But I have run into a lot of sisters who have hit me up for locksmith services saying, I want to buy black. You know what I'm saying? I ain't
Mm-hmm.
got no black men hit me up talking that shit. You know what I'm saying? Other than the ones that are in, like, I'm in a group called Men of Accountability Group, and we spend money with each other. But outside of that, you get a lot of, why is your price so high? How come there's no discounts? What's the guarantee that this shit is going to work?
Oh,
You know what
right.
I'm saying? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And my dad told me a long time ago, if you're going to make money in this country, you're not going to make it off black people.
Mm.
So my dad said that, and my dad is a 50-year veteran doing the same thing I'm doing.
Mm.
So to me, I think that because of the conscious awareness, unintentionally, of the feminist movement, a
Mm.
lot of black women intentionally buy from black people, black men and women. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that a lot of men on the whole will talk that shit, but because of the red pill movement and the quote unquote high value man thing,
Yeah.
is get money at all costs, and I don't care who I buy from, who I spend with. And to me, that's you got to be intentional with it. Like I try my best to spend money with dudes who do this, who do what I'm looking for, black men and black women
Yeah.
who do what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And that's because I have 30, 40 years of black power in my heart. So I try my best to spend with them, but I just don't see that in a large scale. And that's the thing to me that Umar should shut the fuck up and start talking about.
Woo.
Instead of running around this country and talking about this dumb shit he be talking about, why don't you talk about how black people should spend money with each other? But now you going on podcasts talking about these gender issues, and that's how he reinvented himself. You know what I'm saying? He
Mm.
reinvented himself as
Reinvent
a
himself. Right.
Ding ding ding
Right.
ding 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 ding. That's it.
yeah, because
Wow.
we clapped the door on him years ago when he got into that war with Sarah Sutasetti, and he insulted Sarah Sutasetti because he was light skinned. That wasn't cool with me.
Mm.
That
Yeah.
was not cool with me. That man said that Sarah Sutasetti had inferior genetics. I can never fuck with him after that. I can never fuck with him after that, bro. That's crazy. When you say something like that, that's black hatred. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
saying? So
Mm-hmm.
now you go on the Breakfast Club and you get to talk about interracial dating and everybody loves you. Get the fuck out of here, son. Like, come on. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
for me, that's what he really should be talking about. He should be inspiring brothers and sisters, but the sisters is doing it already. And listen, y'all ain't got to say it, but I'm gonna say it. The sisters is doing it. I had a lot of sisters hit me up just because they want to spend black. Brothers ain't doing that, except
Yeah.
for a select few. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'm talking. I'm overtaking this part,
No,
this
this
show.
No,
is
you good.
great.
You good, G? Yeah.
I'm tired of hearing myself talk anyway.
Yo, can I ask y'all a question?
Go ahead,
But
Hollow.
this is for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's a lot easier for Jewish people to buy Jewish in Crown Heights than it is for black people to buy black in Bed-Stuy or Brownsville or a bunch of other neighborhoods where they don't have any fucking businesses?
No, this is true. And put Brighton Beach in there too, son.
Yeah,
Put Brighton, because
it would
Brighton
be
Beach is
a lot
overran
easier
by Jews.
logistically to buy back if you actually had black business, if you
Yeah.
actually had a black neighborhood or a real black community.
Mm-hmm.
All we
Mm-hmm.
have is black people living in houses that other people own, and all the businesses is from foreigners.
Mm.
That's
Truth be
not a
told.
black neighborhood.
Right.
Truth be
It's not a
told.
black community. So logistically, you're not gonna buy. It's like the average person wants to do things easy. It's a lot easier if you just walk outside of your house and go to the store and buy something.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Right.
You ain't gonna go do an internet search and get a GPS setting for the nearest black business. Nobody's going through all of that. The
Yeah.
average person is not doing that. So you have to make things easy for people to buy black. And by doing that, that would be called having an actual black community.
Yeah.
Well, that Amos Wilson touched on that. It's an excellent point, Holla. And Amos Wilson touched on that. Looking up in this section of the chapter that we read, page 586.
Hmm.
When he says the penetration of the economy and markets of the black community by alien businesses leads not
Mm,
only to the exploitation of that community by taking approximately, and this was in the 90s, approximately 95% of its income back to their own communities, but by
mm-hmm.
hiring relatively few blacks to work in their establishments, and by not paying even those few a living wage, they help to maintain its impoverished conditions. Talking about black folks.
I want to give a little bit of pushback on this idea though,
Okay, okay.
and that is that so to supplement my income when my business quote unquote went slowed down and now it's exploded, but I started doing security as in security guard services, me and my little ass. And last night I did a Guyanese wedding.
Mm-hmm.
Holy shit, there was a lot of Guyanese people there.
Mm.
It looked like a Guyanese country music concert, son.
Mm.
And I started thinking as I'm standing there, these people always spend money with each other.
Mm.
And it's like when my ex, what you call it, had roaches in her house, so they brought over Guyanese exterminator. I didn't even know Guyanese people exterminated. You know what I'm saying? Like
Wow.
I'm like, goddamn, you got the Guyanese cat's eye or whatever. So I guess what I'm saying is that it's, bro. I agree with you, Hollup, that we should have businesses in our community and make it easier. But the Guyanese don't necessarily do that. But they have there's a mentality, and the mentality is before I go to any other color, I got to make sure a Guyanese person don't do that first. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's the
And
same
that's
thing.
so what?
That's the same thing the Jews do.
Exactly, exactly.
Mhm.
So I think that it's a combination of what you're saying and what I'm saying, which is yes, it would be easier if we had black businesses. That I can't argue with that. But I think also a group thought that I have to check and make sure a black person don't do this before I go spend it with somebody else. That would go a long way, and that mentality is not here.
Mm.
Mhm.
There
Oh, I
there
don't
was a
disagree.
Yeah, as a whole, it's not. But there have been efforts. Like there was I think it was a black buying guide.
Yep.
Um, I'm part of a co-op that does like every other Saturday, especially now with fruits and vegetables, whatever you
Mm.
need as far as toiletries, paper towels,
Mm-hmm.
um, soaps, things like that, that they sell. So it's buying black. It's every other Saturday, but it's buying black.
Mm.
Right.
And I remember and I found a couple people through that guide. And this was a few years back, before the pandemic hit, and I was
Mm-hmm.
really searching, and so there's some efforts, but as a whole, for everything we need, it's still easier to go to the grocery store. I mean, we work at a grocery store, so, but it's not,
Right.
it's supporting somebody's salary, but it's not buying black. The
Right.
producers aren't black. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yep.
also I doubt any other ethnic group would allow. Like I can't
Yeah.
see other ethnic groups are more cohesive than us based on actually having coming from a place where they were cohesive at one point. We've
Right.
been in America for so long, we don't know what it's like to operate as a group.
Mm.
Such a
Scooby
We
good
Jones.
really
point.
don't.
It's it's been degraded over the years. I mean, even since we were children, it's degraded from then. I mean, I see the difference. And just
Mm.
talking to say some 20 somethings recently, and listening to their take on the current situation, if it's politics or just living. And I'm like, some of the things that we saw as that we were able to see as some wins, I guess some
Hmm.
minor wins, they're not seeing anything. And
Mm.
it's like it just gets worse and worse, but it's like there's nothing. So
No,
that sense of
I agree.
that sense of community is just based on aesthetics, just race, and it's pretty vague.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Now, you're right. These young people don't think we did a goddamn
That's
thing.
right. That's right.
And I think it's B Simone, who is a very popular YouTuber that says,
Yeah.
periodically really says some dumb shit. She's
Yeah.
the one that championed saying Martin Luther King didn't do nothing. Like he didn't,
Oh.
you know what I'm saying? And when I heard that, that's when I knew. I was like, oh my God, like this is way worse than I thought it was. You know? And Umar, I think, was arguing with Cynthia G, another popular YouTuber that advocates the aborting of black babies.
Oh Lord.
And
Black
she said
black
that Martin,
male babies.
you're right, you're
Psychotic.
right, my bad. And she was on that panel with Umar, and he was saying, "You're saying Frederick Douglass and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X didn't anything?" And she said no. She said no.
What?
Yeah, she said no, bro. She said no. So, like, for me, that's why I don't be arguing with these young people no more. Because if your position is Martin Luther King, which we can argue about the integration or whatever, but that's a man that he died for what he believed in, and you're gonna say he didn't believe in anything? There's really nothing I can say to y'all.
Mm,
And she's on the internet
mm.
Yep,
with a voice, allowed to speak publicly to everybody,
yep,
but nobody did nothing. Okay, it makes sense.
That's also
Makes sense.
that nonsense gets elevated. We seem to be the loudest and providing that material, and it's going to be elevated.
Mm.
It's going to
right,
because it's there's no awareness. Well, I won't say there's no awareness.
It's
There are people who
profitable.
are aware. Bingo. There are people who are aware and don't care because it's profitable.
Mm.
Yeah, it's
right,
profitable. It's
And
profitable to
so
hate on your own people.
that's right. And so,
Mm.
as
You
a
make
larger group, we need to know that and act
right.
accordingly and say, okay, this person is a fool. What they're saying is outrageous. Forget them. Excuse me, I'm not gonna curse. Just forget them.
So, Minister Dual, you mentioned how well, let me state this. I remember a few Sundays ago in the book club, I was talking to Helena and Ethel in terms of like why a lot of our people don't want to put in the effort or the work, to get to a place of like ownership and stuff. And my thought was the idea of what work means to them in their mind. And I was thinking, whenever sometimes people say, oh, we got to put in the work, we got to put in the effort, I'm thinking what they're probably thinking is slavery or out in the field. Like that's what they're visualizing when they hear the word work. So therefore, they're not as big of a proponent when it comes to, wanting to do for their own people and such. And my question to you is, Dawood, with how Nation of Islam was back then, where everybody was, contributing and doing something, and then the second wave came over and,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, loosened it. Do you also think another reason why people aren't as? Do you also think another reason why the second wave isn't the same as the first is because people saw what previous generations did and just thought, well, I don't want to do that because they feel like they'll be defined as just a laborer in Nation of Islam versus just
Nah,
wanting to live
nope.
their best
Oh,
life. Okay.
I can answer that real easily for you, bro.
Mm-hmm.
It's the message.
Mm.
So I talked about this on my show years ago.
Okay.
I used to read a lot of military history and strategy.
Okay.
And one of the things they talked about in one of the magazines was the power of Nazi propaganda. And so during the war,
Mm-hmm.
during World War II,
Mm-hmm.
there was much more Americans that were basically in shell shock. You know what I'm saying? Like they didn't want to go back to war because I mean, my nigga, bombs is dropping around you. Like I would be in
Right.
shell shock too.
Right. Right.
But there was much less Nazis that were shell shocked. And the reason being is the
Hmm.
Nazi propaganda made you want to take a bullet for Hitler.
Hmm.
It made you want to take a bullet for Hitler. You was gonna die for that man. You know
Hmm.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so the propaganda changed because under
Mm.
the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the propaganda, the main message was do for self.
Right.
Under Minister Farrakhan, the main message was you gotta know God. You gotta know God. God is in man. God this, God that. You see how it changed?
Yeah.
Under the
Okay.
Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he said God came to give you this and give you that so that you can go do this for yourself and that for yourself.
Right.
Farrakhan came with the you don't know God, and that's the reason why the nation fell. The nation fell because we were so busy working on building, we didn't have time for God. You see how slick that shit is?
Oh. Damn.
That was what that man was flying around the country preaching. We had a strong nation, but the reason why it fell is because it wasn't built off the spirit. It was built off of knowledge and work. So now everybody's enamored with getting this God because, first of all, you got this light-skinned dude with wavy hair that's getting all the ladies, and you want to be like him. Let's just keep it 100. You want to be like him. So you're going to do anything he does. Because let me tell you something, son, and I'm not ashamed to admit this.
Yeah.
You think I didn't have wavy hair in a part at some point?
Yeah.
Ain't part of the uniform.
Yep, I definitely did. When I went to go see my dad, he looked at me and said, "What the hell is this?" I said, "What do you mean?" I had my Farrakhan part, you know what I'm saying, and my head was wavy.
Farrakhan part.
I did. You know the long part that goes all the way to the back of your head? I had that. We all had that. You know what I'm saying? Brothers would wear do-rags at night so they could get waves. It was sick. It was sick. Nobody wanted to look under the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The only thing that you did to look like him is he had sunglasses, so you wore sunglasses. That's it. But under Farrakhan, you tried to look like this fool. And so, you know what I'm saying? Like the message and the propaganda changed. So what I'm saying to you is it's the message.
Okay.
Because if you want to build owners, then the message has to be about ownership. But if you want to build followers, then the message is about being a follower. So the average white person today is not trying to be an owner, even though he can be an owner. He's not trying to be one. And that's why you got Grant Cardone and all these other dudes that make millions of dollars trying to teach white men and white women how to be owners. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. We don't have that as black people because, again, like I said before, if Umar was teaching the right message, he'd be running around the country trying to teach men and women how to be owners. But instead, he's got his message where he reinvented himself and he's inserted himself into the gender war. Who the fuck cares about the gender war? Who cares about that? Yeah. So to me, if you don't have a strong message in the black community about being an owner, I myself am a descendant of a father that was a business owner and a grandmother that was a business owner. And it took me until 40 before I even wanted to own a business. People would be telling me like, "Oh, you can go into business for yourself doing this locksmith shit." And I'd be like, "Hey, I'm making enough money working for somebody." You know what I'm saying? Like I would talk lip service like, "One day I'm gonna own my own." But I didn't truly believe that. I didn't truly believe that. But now it's all about that. And so much so that I be telling my coworkers because they be like, "I'm gonna go in the office and I'm gonna ask them for $2 more." I'm like, what the fuck is $2 going to do for your paycheck? Right. What you need to do is take your skill and apply it after work, and that's where your $2 is going to come from. And they just look at me like I'm crazy. And I'm talking about not black dudes, white dudes. Right. So this ownership thing is not indigenous to us. It's just that we need it. I feel like we need it more than them because they have a country that they own. Right. We don't have a country that we own. Right. So if the message and the propaganda was stronger towards ownership, you would see black people trying to be owners. If the music talked about ownership, you know what I'm saying? Like you got Rick Ross talking about being an owner and Jay-Z talking about being an owner. Yeah. And most people throw all that owning shit out the window and they just want to look like Jay-Z. Right. That's it. Right. Right. And then I remember Hollow could speak to this because on the Math Hoffa show, Math Hoffa and them, they had I forget what that DJ, I think it's Clark Kent that had him on. And Clark Kent, is the one that knows the most about Jay-Z. Yeah. And all those niggas was talking about was, man, I remember I wanted to have a t-shirt like him. That's what we gonna talk about? Right. You know what I'm saying? So this sickness runs much deeper than we be thinking. And the reality of it is that that's why Marcus Garvey, Noble Drew Ali, Honorable Elijah Muhammad was so successful is because their propaganda was about owning.
Was the civil rights movement bittersweet in its trajectory of gaining equal rights and justice in America? So what I mean by that in the question is, was it bittersweet when the civil rights movement's main focus or their attention bittersweet in just equal rights and getting justice in America? And I say that because from the book that we read in the section, the civil rights movement as a consumer movement, and then also the victorious self-defeat, Amos Wilson mentions that although it was a very it was progressive in, gaining fair treatment amongst its people. A lot of light that was shed on supporting within the community and black businesses started to fade away. And it became more of this of anything you can do, I can do better kind of thing, to where, okay, let's go ahead and fight for, getting the white jobs, and, let's start, spending like white people, like, hey, we got money too and we could spend. It was like, in a way, we're trying to match the lifestyle of white people, and instead took off the lenses of just supporting what we have, together, and what we can build. So that was my question that I wanted to, reiterate. Was it bittersweet that we focused on, social justice and rights, and not necessarily the whole spectrum? Any thoughts on that?
Definitely. I think it was a huge loss for us not focusing on the whole. It was, laser pointed to being accepted, blending in, and that goes to who took over the narrative for our community,
Mm.
and how we should move forward. And I just remember as a child, I mean, it was that push for, let's say, integration. Was it? It was a big term,
Mm-hmm.
and instead of holding fast with, because it was like, okay, you're being included, you're American, everything that our people went through to build this country, we're Americans, so all of these opportunities should be coming our way, and not focusing like when Amos Wilson mentions in here rejecting the Garvey movement, the UNIA, and the
Mm-hmm.
Nation of Islam as black nationalists or separatist movements, and just that disdain for that part, which it was important for our people, because it would say that we, it would be something that, well, the focus would be on our entire experience, and understanding that we're not going to be completely accepted, quote
Right.
unquote. So this integration wouldn't be all of us. There would need to be something for our people if things don't go well, integrating, quote unquote, into the largest society. How would we hold on to, or how would we have something for our community, for our future? And the whole thought process just shifted to integration, and that would solve everything.
Mm.
And clearly that wasn't the case then. If there, and there were people who, like I mentioned here, the UNIA and the Nation of Islam, who were saying that's not going to be the case where we're just accepted into everything. We need to have something of our own. We need to push for that. And it was just one way. It was the outward push into jobs, and to being able to shop with everybody else, be integrated fully into the larger society.
I
So
think
now,
I
okay.
think it was bitter,
Mm-hmm.
not even bittersweet,
Just bitter.
Uh,
just bitter. Because what did we end up really winning as a result of it? The ability to get hired by white people?
yeah.
Mm.
What if we had gone the complete opposite direction? We would be in Iberia right now.
Mm.
So I say bitter, no sweet. I don't even taste the sweetness.
But that was that was who the disdain was for. That was considered the blacks being a black separatist, um, hostile to the country that our people built. And again, the people who took over the movement, their direction was here.